Is your company culture legitimate? Or is it a couple of signs in your break room? And maybe an occasional email with a fancy logo from the HR department. I think it's really important that you understand what your company culture truly stands for. Let's get away from the imaginary culture and dive in and find out what the real culture of your company might be and how you might influence it and what to do if you can't influence it. My name is Sid Mickle. I've spent 40 years in the sales management, and consulting world. I've called on some of the largest retailers in the United States for years. I've gone through probably the worst business disaster in the history of the retail world, and that is the 1982 Tylenol tampering and other catastrophes, disasters, minor setbacks, and huge success stories. So I would tell you that I have a pretty good grasp on the idea of culture. And the reason I tell you that I have a great deal of experience with a real beneficial company culture is this company. I wrote this book about a small Chicago company called Outer Circle Products a few years ago. The principles that we followed within this company established the single greatest work environment I've ever been a part of, and I would tell you most people who work there feel the same way today. But that's a story for later on. Right now, we're going to talk about examining your company culture. And we talked about some things that might make it appear like a culture, but those things might be illegitimate. Most companies' culture exists to make employees believe they have a voice and then shut down that voice. That's just the way it is because most company cultures are driven from the management level down. There is no or very little upward flow of information and opinion and structural change coming from the employees. Let's ask a question of you. Do you work in a business environment where a manager basically is telling you what to do? And does that manager expect you to do it immediately and do it as you were told? Or does that manager give you an idea of something that might help and ask you for your input? Do they ask you how you feel about it, what your ideas are in making it work? Now, yes, sometimes that can just be the difference in a really good manager versus a really poor manager. And we all know the business world and most every company has a mixture of both. Even in this great company that I mentioned earlier, we had that. And it was a mighty struggle to drag the manager who didn't want to accept our culture forward and make sure that he understood there was no opportunity for discussion. It was our culture. He had to comply with our culture. If you're looking at your day-to-day job, when you go to work, are you happy to go to work? Do you feel like everything you do while you're there is driving that company toward a goal that basically everyone in the company agrees with and wants to have occur? Usually that doesn't happen. And I would tell you that the bigger the company, the harder that is. And you're going to hear from people that you can't have a culture, you have to have a management level that drives the company. Look, management levels do come up with strategic changes. Sometimes they have information that line employees don't have. That is a natural and okay occurrence. Where it goes wrong, where it all gets off track, is when managers can't be called upon. They just can't be bothered with explaining. They can't be bothered with giving the details of why these projects, these directives, or their demands are really toward a goal that is good for everyone. That is when you have a culture that is driven by a boss, by an old school mentality that says, I want you to respect my authority because of my title. in a company that has a healthy and a very growth oriented and relationship building culture, managers are going to want to get information. They're going to want to explain. And here is, again, the biggest problem. When I worked for this great company that had the positive culture in Chicago, our owner, our founder, first, before he did any of the work talking to the employees about a cultural change, went to the managers and had a long conversation about would they be able to do this? Because if you're going to have this positive cultural change where everyone counts, where everyone has input, not only the right for input, but the obligation for input, you've got to have your managers 100% on board. And boy, let me tell you, that is a tough task. If your ownership or if the founders, presidents, the person who ultimately makes the final choice says, this is how we're going to do business or you're going to work somewhere else, that's the first step in building a positive and healthy internal business culture. Until that happens, it's all games. It's all playing the game and putting a little bit of a smile on people's faces when they don't really care. You'll be able to understand this when you get some sort of a glimpse of what a real culture is about. A culture that demands respect of everyone from everyone. A culture that says you are obligated to be open about your ideas and your thoughts and your opinions, even your objections. You are required to be open. Now, openness was one of our principles back in the old company in Chicago, but it doesn't mean there's just a free-for-all of saying anything you want. Oh, no. Because you have to be respectful first. You have to be professional. But in order to be taken serious, you have to understand what you're talking about. And you have to have a story and a group of facts to present your case. Let me give you one quick example about conflict resolution when I was a manager in this company. Because we know if you're in an office or if you're in a company sales force, whatever department, you're going to have a conflict, a difference of opinion, and sometimes just personalities collide. I was charged as a manager in this company to have an open door. People could come in and talk to me about basically anything. And every conversation was respectful and it was professional on both sides of the desk, or there was a problem. Here's how it worked. If Joe came in to me and said, I've got a problem with Sarah, my first response would be, okay, have you talked to Sarah about this? And usually when you ask that question, there's this dumbfounded look of, well, what do you mean? I'm coming to you. Well, no, you don't want to come to me. You want to go and have an honest, respectful, and very open conversation about the conflict. And if the two of you can't resolve your conflict or can't find some common ground and move forward and be okay with each other, then you bring it to me. But understand this, when you bring it to me as your manager, both sides are going to have a very different type of evaluation. It's always going to be respectful. It's always going to be professional, but it's going to be a much deeper dive. And at the end of that conversation, I'm going to have to do what managers do. Even in a principled culture, even in a company with a living and thriving environment of respect and openness, managers have to manage. Managers make the call on certain things and they pass the judgment. They pass the direction or instruction. Now that's a very clear example of how we operated our business. That's what we did when we had any kind of employee difficulty. But the other thing that was absolutely important and very critical for our company was that every manager in that company had to believe in, had to buy into, and had to act every day in accordance with the principles that established our culture. So think about this from your job today. Are any of those things done? Is there absolute and ultimate respect? Is there any hope of openness? Are doors open? Are ears open? Are managers open to comments and conversations, suggestions, or questions? Are there any paths that you can take to make sure that you're free to give your opinion in a professional way to make a situation better? Many times the answer to that is absolutely not. The boss said do this and you better do it or you're going to have a problem. You're not going to get a raise, you're not going to get a good evaluation, and they're going to be on your butt every day because you're a bad employee. Well, that's exactly how many company cultures operate. They operate out of authority given by title, and they have no true association and no true desire to create a culture that gives everyone a voice. If you are in that situation, you have two choices. Now, one is you can try your best to make sure those respectful, open things are part of your daily work interactions with people. May be one-sided. May go well, may not go well. Maybe you're a department manager and you can start to implement these things on your own. And within your group, those things will work well for you. But maybe it comes down to simply this. Maybe you're in the wrong place. Maybe you're working for a company that has no respect for their employees, or very little, and wants to continue along the path of titles have authority, do what I tell you to do. Now, the big payout to all this. In our company, we were very small when we started. We had about $3 million in sales. As we implemented our culture and we began to get incredible input and incredible buy-in from every employee, everything changed. Our entire way of doing business, we looked at how to be efficient. We looked at how to make sure we did things better. We looked at how the sales force could be better in their relationships to the inner office, and likewise, how we could just take away those old standard conflicts of, well, marketing is not going to listen to sales and sales knows marketing's full of it. No, we're going to have open, honest, and really solid conversations that lead us to better business practices. Because if we have better business practices and everybody understands that, we're pulling the rope together. We're all trying to do something that makes our company more successful. Now, look, there'll be people out here who hear this kind of information or this kind of language, and they just scoff at it. They just go, employees can't be treated that way. They'll just take over the company and it'll be a disaster. Well, actually, no, it doesn't have to be a disaster. If you have managers who understand what the ultimate goal of a culture really is. And typically, if you can get the HR department out of the way sometimes and have people create their own situations. They don't need at times a referee. Now, at times they do need a referee. But if they have an opportunity to get things resolved without any other interference from HR or a manager or a supervisor, there's a potential for them to make their relationships better, their operations better, maybe their entire departments better. I've lived this culture. I've gone through it and I've seen unbelievable personal growth, unbelievable commitment to the job, and an unparalleled feeling of success with everything that goes on. Now, there's one other key element I want to talk to you about. How do you feel in your company when you make a mistake? Let's say it's a costly mistake. Are you worried for your job? Are you sure you're going to get chewed up and down by the boss? Okay, that's kind of the standard way of doing business in most companies. Even those who have that really beautiful poster on the break room wall talking about your great, positive culture. Well, if you really do have a great, positive culture, you're going to sit down and explain the mistake, and people are going to listen, and they're going to offer advice on where it went wrong and why it went wrong. But more than anything, they're going to be there to support you get through that mistake, learn from it, not make the mistake again, and figure out a way to repair it. Now, that's a strange thought, isn't it? There's an idea that we're not just going to eliminate someone because they made a mistake, I'll step over them. No, that's not the way your culture should be operating. You should be a team, and you should be concerned with each other. I understand. That sounds like unicorns and rainbows, but in all reality, it's not. It's a fact. It can exist. It absolutely can be done within your company. I've lived it and I've seen it and I understand how positive it is. And over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some individual principles that make your culture work better. And I would encourage you all to think about these things. Think about how you can make your company's environment, that world you work in, that world you live in at work, because no matter what anybody tells you, work is not family. Work is work. And let me talk about a couple of other things that are going to pay out for you. Not only is it the positivity that surrounds the employees and the managers and the entire operation that you're going through as a whole, you have certain things that are much better. And one of those is retention of employees. When you have a culture like we had, people don't want to take the chance on going somewhere else and leaving that beneficial culture as much as they do when the culture is bad and they're in a desperate search mode to find a job where they don't hate getting in their car and going to work every day. Retention was one of the big positives that we had in our company when we really began to fully develop our new and positive company culture, what we called the principled culture. But until next week when we sit down together again, take care of yourselves. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.